There's a lot about women's health that is, well, let's say unique. Unique hormones, cycles, menstruation, reproductive system, and pregnancy. And often, we lack proper education on how our bodies work and what to do if something is not right. If you struggle with menstrual health or infertility, today's episode will answer some questions for you. Lindsey Lusson is my guest. She is a registered dietitian with over 14 years of experience, specializing in helping women reclaim their menstrual health and fertility. Listen in and share with a friend. You may have noticed that this is our 98th podcast episode, and we have some fun announcements, including a giveaway for the 100th episode. So make sure that you're listening and checking back in for the 100th episode celebration. I am very grateful and excited to celebrate this with you. Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Meredith. I've led my family on a transformative health journey for over a decade, and now I help other families do the same. This is a place where busy moms can learn about healthy living. I hope that what you learn here helps you feel empowered to take the next step in your family's health journey. Hey, Lindsey, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you reached out and excited to chat today.
Yeah, so please tell me more of your story because I think there's some things that I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've been a registered dietitian for almost 14 years. Did a variety of different things throughout my RD career. But what I do today is kind of most relevant to my own personal struggle with period loss and infertility. So long story short, I didn't have a period for over 13 years. And it was masked by birth control. But it was kind of like, as a woman, I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit sometimes because we know our bodies really well. We have that sixth sense. We have that intuition. So while I was on birth control, I always kind of knew in the back of my mind, like, something ain't right here. Like, I should be able to get a period without having to induce a period on the pill. But I just didn't have any answers. And so nothing really came of any of that until I came off the pill and I was ready to start my family. And my OBGYN was like, okay, like, you're going to have to start fertility treatment. And I was kind of taking a step back because I was like, but what about like all these other things that we can do before we have to go there? So that led me on a bit of a journey to kind of figure out, okay, why is my period missing? I finally got a name for what I believe to be going on with me, which is hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is a huge mouthful. So we're just going to call it HA. And I had to make some really hard changes. I had to really dial back my exercise. I had to eat a lot more. I had to put on some body fat that wasn't incredibly comfortable for me. But in doing so, I did get my period back and I was able to start ovulating regularly and I was able to get pregnant naturally 3 times. And so that's the work that I do today. I help active women get their period back, be able to ovulate naturally, get pregnant, and take home healthy babies.
I love that. So you really kind of started with a broader dietitian work and kind of now work with women.
Yeah, that's correct. I kind of started building my business now, being 6 years in. I started building this during COVID. It was kind of like my little side hustle project. And then it just grew and grew and grew. And then I took it full time in 2022.
Wow. Okay. So when you mention HA, I hear hypothalamus in that. Can you explain a little bit what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. You're picking up on the right words. So the hypothalamus is a area in the brain that's kind of your brain's control center. So it controls your mood, your sleep-wake cycles. It controls your temperature regulation. And it also controls the production and release of hormones. And so when we talk about hypothalamic amenorrhea, amenorrhea means no period for 3 months or longer. And then the hypothalamic part of the word points back to the fact that, hey, there's something up with the signaling in the brain that's preventing the body from producing hormones.
Okay, awesome. And how long did you really kind of, I guess, maybe looking back now that you know that's what it was, how long do you think you struggled with that?
Over a decade. Like, wow. So to rewind the clock and get a little bit more detailed in my story, I also struggled with an eating disorder from about senior year of high school until basically fully working on getting my period back. And that's a long story, but to kind of sum it all up, I was never really underweight. I'm not what most people think about when they think eating disorder. And so because of that, I was able to hide a lot of things that were really unhealthy and justify a lot of behaviors because I didn't look like I had an eating disorder. And so while I did get formal treatment, and that was a really important part of my story, there was a good 6 or 7 years of my life where I lived with what I would call more functional disordered eating than eating disorder. But because of the trauma my body had been through with the eating disorder, the functional disordered eating was what was keeping my period from coming.
Gotcha. And you said it was kind of a struggle to put on the body fat that you needed. Do you think that went back to some of the disordered eating?
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know how much you know about eating disorders, but I was visiting with a therapist recently, and he was saying that he, in his 40 years of working with a variety of different orders, that eating disorders are one of the hardest mental illnesses to overcome. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're so normalized in today's culture. Kind of the same habits that people are engaging in that struggle with eating disorder are praised when people are in normal sized bodies. And so that was definitely my experience. And I think the combination of getting so much praise made me feel that my body couldn't change.
Yeah.
And it almost started to become an identity. And so when I did have to do that for my health and for my hormones and for my fertility, it wasn't easy.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. How long would you say your recovery was until you had a natural period back and you had more of a healthy mental state when it comes to food?
Yeah, it's interesting because people would think that the physical recovery, especially like myself going a decade plus without a period, that would take a long time. It really didn't. I got my period back in less than a month and I was pregnant 3 months later.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it totally is. And that's actually, and I don't mean to sound like I'm some unicorn. I mean, we've definitely worked with clients where it takes more like 3 to 6 months to see a period return. And then, adding that timeline onto their time to pregnancy and having a baby.
Right.
But in working with 350 plus women on the same issue, I will say that the physical recovery, getting your period back, being able to get pregnant is actually typically quicker than fully getting to the other side of the body dysmorphia, the disordered eating habits, the compulsive overexercise. Fully coming out of that is usually more of a 6 to 12 month process for people.
Okay. That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that and sharing part of your story. As you have worked with women, have you found that this is a pretty common issue, people that are not having their period naturally?
Yeah, it is pretty common and kind of under talked about. And it gets really confusing in a clinical setting because a lot of women are diagnosed with PCOS. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there can be PCOS-like things going on while there's still kind of this disordered eating, overtraining thing going on. The two can occur at once. We've definitely worked with some clients that have that too. But a lot of times what we'll see when somebody gets diagnosed with PCOS is they start restricting carbs, exercising more, trying to lose weight, all of the things that are actually making their hormones a hot mess and making that hot mess a bigger hot mess. So It's tricky. It is relatively common, just to give some statistics, about 50% of women who are pretty active will struggle with irregular cycles. And the cause for the irregular cycles could be a myriad of things, but a common thing that happens in active women is not understanding how to properly fuel for their training load and volume. We see this in athletes and we see this in recreational exercising women as well, especially when people have the drive to work out as much as they are because they're trying to lose body fat or control their body size, you name it. So sometimes we'll see not total period loss, but we'll see irregular cycles, difficulty ovulating, difficulty getting pregnant, and it can go back to the stress they're putting on their body with too much exercise and underfueling, kind of that combination.
Yeah.
And then another 30% of active women will experience the amenorrhea, the no period at all, for 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Well, I'm listening to you talk and I'm this sounds like all of the messaging that we hear as women, work out every day, reduce calories. No wonder this is a problem.
Right.
Yeah. And as you have worked with these women and even in your own story, what have you noticed as common root causes? I mean, you just kind of mentioned some, under eating, under fueling, overworking out. Is that pretty much all, or is there some more to it?
Sometimes we'll see really type A, perfectionistic, high performing personalities because as much as the underfueling and the overtraining is a huge part of why this occurs. There's also the psychological and mental stress. That's kind of a third prong, kind of root cause of why this is happening, and therefore an important thing to address in healing this properly. So we work with a lot of like physician's assistants and physical therapists and attorneys, like people who are just like climbing the corporate ladder and like killing it in their job. And while those people are like high performing and there's nothing wrong with that, like clearly they're really successful, I found that those tend to be the people that are like the best at ignoring their body's warning signs. I don't need sleep. I don't need that much food. I can still wake up and push through that class even though I'm sick. Those are typically the personality traits that are leading people to just be a little out of sync with their body.
Yeah. I'm like, am I that? I'm like analyzing myself over here. What am I doing? I probably do that sometimes. I think I do.
And then the other thing that I'll throw in is genetics. So we'll have person A with the exact same training and fueling plan as person B, and person A will lose their cycle and person B won't. So there is always genetic factors. What I always like to describe to people when they're kind of playing the why did this have to happen to me? Because like she's so much fitter than me, or she's so much faster, or I'm not as skinny as her. And it's just that, you know, this is the way that your individual body responds to stress. You are more sensitive to ovulation disruption and period loss under periods of prolonged stress.
That makes sense. And if you go to a conventional doctor with these symptoms, what are some of the conventional treatments that these women are going to have recommended to them?
So a lot of times the doctor's going to ask you this question: are you trying to get pregnant? And if your answer is no, they're probably, if they're a good doctor, they're going to be thorough and run a lot of tests. A lot of the tests will come back normal because the lab ranges for conventional medicine are very broad. So like we'll get lab work back from some of our clients to be like, oh, my labs are normal. We're like, hey, girl, your estrogen is 10. Like that's not normal. That's really low. So, you know, a good doctor will be thorough, do their due diligence, run through lab work. And if through all of that lab work, there's no solution or there's no answer in their mind as to why their period is missing, they'll say, well, let's get you either on hormone replacement therapy, or, you know, if you're trying to prevent pregnancy, let's just put you on the pill. And then on the flip side, if somebody is actively trying to conceive, depending on where someone's hormones are, they might try some low-level fertility interventions like a Clomid or a Femara, kind of our pill ovulation induction. And then if those things don't work, they'll refer them to a fertility clinic. If somebody's hormones are like tanked out and kind of our classic HA case, it'll usually be like a strict referral to a fertility clinic to see a reproductive endocrinologist.
Okay. And what are some of the cons of those approaches?
Well, to get back to the birth control, the whole reason why birth control originally was given for amenorrhea was to protect against bone loss, because when somebody's in a chronic low estrogen state, they are at a higher risk for osteoporosis. Their bone turnover is escalated and their ability to reabsorb and build bone is kind of on halt. You know, their body's just trying to keep you alive. We're not really worried about building awesome bones. So the original thought was, okay, well, let's put women on the pill so they're getting some estrogen, and we can protect against that bone loss. Well, fast forward 15 years in the future, we found out that like that doesn't work. Like we've worked with tons of athletes who have been on the pill and are having like huge femoral stress fractures because the pill, it's not cutting it. So if somebody's going to use medicine, hormone replacement therapy, like the transdermal estrogen patch with cyclical progesterone is a better route, but it doesn't really address why someone isn't cycling.
Right.
And then with a fertility treatment, I mean, I don't want to say that people can't get pregnant doing fertility treatment, but if your hormones are tanked out and your body is too stressed to ovulate, like we kind of got bigger problems. Like we can push and push and push with more meds, and sometimes it works. But again, it doesn't address the root problem, because once you've completed your family, you're back to, you know, hormone replacement therapy for the rest of your life. And you're 35, like you still got 15 to 20 years of like having your own cycle. So
yeah,
you know, I think that those routes can serve a means to a temporary end. But at the end of the day, somebody who's not facing their period is always going to eventually end up back at square one of like, why am I not getting a period? And how long do we Band-Aid this?
Yeah, true. Yeah, Band-Aid it. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And once you start hormone replacement therapy, you're usually on it, right? Like,
right. Yeah. It's not like and some providers will pitch it this way, and I don't know if they really think that it works this way. I've never seen it work this way, and I don't think it's evidence-based to think that it works this way, but they'll kind of be like, oh, we'll try this for a while and see if it jumpstarts your cycle. Like, I honestly do not believe that that's evidence-based, and I've visited with several reproductive endocrinologists and other like functional medicine doctors that will say, no, like we know that it doesn't work that way, but sometimes it's like a bridge. There's a time and a place for that, but it's not the answer to amenorrhea not cycling at all.
Right. I agree. And so you take a more natural approach. Can you kind of explain what that looks like? What does getting an appointment with you look like?
So working inside of our program, we're really addressing the missing period holistically. So kind of understanding, because it can be a little bit different for each person, like why, like what led to the period loss. So like for our athletes, it could be that there was overtraining and we never figured out how to properly replenish the nutrients with the training. And so depending upon the person, we might need to do a temporary reduction in training load and volume as we are renourishing to support their hormones. And sometimes it can simply be a knowledge deficit. Like we've worked with clients that definitely aren't on the disordered eating spectrum at all. They're just like, I had no clue that I was expending thousands of calories and that rice cakes and powdered peanut butter wasn't going to cut it for me. So like sometimes it's like it's a real,
this is what TikTok told me to eat. I mean,
yeah, sure, for sure. We'd say that's about 10% of our clients. 90% are somewhere on this disordered eating spectrum. And so it's going deep on the, why are we training so hard? What are the fears around, changing some routines with exercise, giving your body a break, taking those proper rest days, exploring things like yoga and Pilates instead of the Orange Theory or the, F45s, the really, really high intensity classes. So a lot of it's like a lot of mindset work and mindset shifting, while also making some temporary changes with their exercise, renourishing their body with overall adequate, calories, nutrient timing, looking at micronutrients as well, and consistency with that. And then to go back to the mindset issue, whether somebody needs to gain 5 pounds or 25 pounds, everyone's different. Putting on body fat is kind of the driver for getting those estrogen levels up.
Okay. And like, how do you figure out how much somebody needs to eat? I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, we have like some baseline minimums of where we'll start, but we'll also take a pretty thorough assessment of like someone's job and also their training. So we're always meeting clients in the middle with where they're at with their training. Usually people have to make some sort of changes, but we're not just talking about the time that we're spending in the gym. We're talking about how active is your job? What does your daily commute look like? So we're kind of taking a pretty holistic view of like, what are we expending and knowing kind of our baseline needs. Okay, well, we need to at least be here to support making hormones. And then we might need to go over and above just based upon somebody's activity level and their individual metabolism and their day-to-day.
Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. I mean, it sounds like it's pretty personal because I see a lot of people talking about protein these days and they're like, just eat your body weight in protein or, whatever. And I just like, that doesn't seem very like personal to me, especially for women, like with me.
Yeah, for sure. I'll also say too, a lot of the clients that we work with are getting into plenty of protein. That is usually not the macro that we're lacking on. Yeah. Although if somebody has just a frank underfueling issue, they might be low on protein too. But yeah, to your point, like everybody's needs are different. It is individual. And beyond that, like there's going to be probably some things that we have to coach people on to get them in the right mindset of understanding that they need to be eating.
Yeah. What would you say the biggest mindset struggles are? I mean, why are women feeling like they have to go to the gym all the time?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that some of the biggest mindset issues are just that we're always told to shrink our bodies. Like, regardless of what your natural body looks like, you're told from a really young age that like something's wrong with you, right? So like if you're skinny, it's like, well, you don't have enough curves or you're not muscular. And if you're curvy, it's like you need to lose weight. It's just kind of that impossible standard of beauty that we've set, you like be thin, but don't be too thin, have curves, but don't be too curvy, have the boobs and the butt, but also the waist. Oh, but don't be too fake. It's just kind of that, like, I don't know if you've seen Margot Robbie, the Barbie movie, but just like that whole like monologue that she has, it's so true. And I think that we're constantly trying to live up to this unrealistic standard that quite frankly is just unnatural for people. And so when we push our bodies to extreme to try to achieve something that isn't natural, that's where things can really get out of whack.
Yeah. So you're really helping. Your natural approach is a very thorough intake, really like helping them personalize something for the woman, addressing their nutrition, addressing their movement, right? Their exercise routines. Is there anything else like lifestyle wise that you guys talk about?
Definitely stress management. So a lot of
Yeah.
times it's are turning to exercise for stress relief, which can be a good thing. But when we're overly dependent upon something, we have to think about all types of stressors, because exercise is stress on the body. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. We have to kind of think about all of those stressors going into the same bucket. So the stress that you feel at your job, the stress that you feel to be, whatever, to your partner, the stress that you feel to be a mom, the stress, that you're under for whatever reason, infertility, right? Like it's all going into the same bucket. And so if our stress bucket is like about to overflow and we're doing Orange Theory 5 days a week for an hour, we're kind of just adding gasoline to the fire. And so if we don't address the stress component, we're really missing a really important piece.
That's great. I agree. Like women are very stressed in general. Like no matter if you're a mom or not, or working or not, like there's just so much stress in the world in general for women. So I love that you're addressing that. One thing that crossed my mind as you're talking, like is there a point where someone is just kind of too far gone as far as recovering their period? Like is it too many years have gone by? I've been on birth control too many years, or you know what I mean? Is there a point where you're kind of like, you're just not going to get it,
No, there's always an answer as to why your period is missing. If we get to a point where we've done all the things that should have worked, there's always additional testing that we can do. We can look at imbalances in the gut. We can look at micronutrient deficiencies through a hair tissue and mineral analysis test. We can do further hormone testing through like a dried urine, Dutch test, something like that. There's always an answer. And no, there's no such thing as permanent period loss. There's no such thing as you've been on the pill too long or your eating disorder was too severe. Your body can recover. It might take more time and it might take more thorough tweaks to your routine, but it's always possible to get your body to work again.
Yeah, I've just imagine some women listening like, what? Like there's hope for me? Like, because you go, in a situation like that for years without answers, without like knowing what to do, being told that this is the only thing we can help you, only way we can help you, you know what I mean? So I'm just imagining that there's going to be women listening to this that are like, wow, there's actually some hope out there for me. So I just think that's amazing.
Yeah. It's unfortunately kind of a common misconception, because I've heard this from doctors personally and with clients that I've worked with, this common misconception of like permanent period loss. Well, maybe you permanently damage the communication pathway between your brain and your ovaries. Like, no, like show me like the literature where that has ever happened for any person. I don't want to say it's necessarily like a lazy diagnosis, but it might just be, if you're getting that, it might just be that the provider that you're working with doesn't have the tools, the time, or the resources to explore it further. Because there's always an answer. Like no brick should go unturned before, like women should always have access to answers. And if you don't feel like you're getting those answers with the provider that you're working with, at least in the United States, like we have the freedom to seek out additional support.
Yeah, agree. And do you feel like when you work with women, like how many years have you been doing this now?
6 years.
A while, right? Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of women just need education in general on their menstrual cycle?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'd say, our average client's kind of late 20s, early 30s. So like kind of coming out of that millennial phase, but still very much millennials. And, we grew up in a time where like you would hide your tampons, or like nobody like period, and it was like whispered about. So like periods were so taboo when I was growing up, that most people like know absolutely nothing about their cycle until they're trying to conceive. So there's a huge gap in understanding your body and your hormones. I mean, granted, if you don't have a period or you're on the pill, which is suppressing your body's natural hormone system, we got some catch up time to do some education. But if anybody feels lost in that department, I just want to say that like it's not your fault. Like none of us were told any of that. In like my 7 years of schooling to become a dietitian, like we learned very little about the menstrual cycle and hormones.
Wow. What would you say are the kind of the basic things that women need to understand?
I'd say the basic things you need to understand is that even though we think about like our period as being the main event, because it's off a very like tangible thing that we see, you go buy products, when you're on your period, that's not actually the main event of the menstrual cycle. The main event is ovulation. And when you're on the pill, you're shutting down ovulation. So technically, when you're on the pill, you're not getting a real period. You're getting a withdrawal bleed to the synthetic hormones that the pill is providing. So that's one thing that I would want everyone to know. And to understand that instead of thinking about like, oh, like when's my period going to be here? Or my period comes every month, to start thinking once you're off the pill, okay, period comes after ovulation. So if we can pay attention and learn our body's natural clues about what's happening during ovulation, like signs of cervical mucus, feeling an increase in libido. If you're doing any hormonal testing, you can kind of see some changes in your hormones to know when your body's about to ovulate. But if we can have a pinpoint when our ovulation is happening, then we know our period's going to come 10 to 14 days later. And so it doesn't have to be this guessing game of like, I wonder when my period's going to arrive. We have the ability to tune into our bodies and to learn how our bodies are changing throughout the month or throughout our cycle, because some people will have cycles that are longer than a month. But if we can think about ovulation as being the main event, period comes after ovulation. Okay, when I know my ovulating, I know when my period is coming. It can actually be a pretty powerful tool to understanding why you feel like you're about to like attack your partner, or why you feel like so in the mood certain times of the month, but not other times. So I feel like our hormones can tell us a lot about just how we're interacting in our day to day. And I think knowledge is power. So I think it's a cool tool, and I understand that like cycle tracking isn't for everybody, but especially for people who are thinking about starting their family, like even in the next 1 to 5 years, it's a great way to just kind of understand your hormones and kind of pre-plan for starting your family as well.
Yeah. Is it best just to kind of journal your cycle so you can kind of start to understand your body that way?
Yeah, I always tell people to start paying attention to cervical mucus, and that might feel like a little bit icky for some people, but it's kind of like the biggest obvious sign that we have that our hormones are changing. And so like when you go to the bathroom, you can see if it's visible in your underwear. You can also check internally. But tracking cervical mucus can give you clues about when you're fertile and when you're not. And making notes of that. I mean, this day and age, like your Apple Watch has a period tracking app. Your phone has a period tracking app. Like there's a ton of free ones. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just making those notes and then going back and looking at patterns that are unique to you.
Yeah. Okay. That's great advice. Thank you for the little menstrual cycle 101 class.
Yeah.
And I'm just like thinking we have a lot of mamas on here that are going to have teen girls. And we kind of talked about that, like not learning all these things when we were teen girls. So what advice would you give to teen girls that, want to have a healthy period and a healthy menstrual cycle as they get older?
Yeah, I would just say it's worth educating yourself about hormonal birth control. I'm not going to say that one route is better than the other. I just think that women should be educated, because I think that our generation, we're not educated on the pill. And it was kind of like, it was given for like any hormonal issue under the sun. Oh, you have heavy, painful periods? Here's the pill. Oh, you have no period? Here's the pill, And so it can be a good tool for some people, but I would just encourage people to understand the side effects of birth control.
Yeah.
The Fifth Vital Sign by Lisa Henderson's-Jack is a really great resource for understanding your menstrual cycle, understanding your hormones, and just understanding what the kind of the downsides of hormonal birth control. But if you read that book and you're like, I feel better on the pill, or like, this is a foolproof plan for preventing pregnancy, this is the best route for me, then like that's something that you get to decide. But I think that just kind of understanding both sides of it is really important. And to understand that like your cycle is a vital sign, as that book implies. And so if something is off with your period, exploring that, at least bringing it up to your provider and talking through, making notes of that, advocating for yourself, because whether you're on this end of the spectrum with no period at all, or you're on the other end of the spectrum of like, oh my gosh, my period comes like, every 12 days and it's heavy and it's painful, like nobody should have to continue to have cycles like that. Like there's always, just like there's an answer to why your period is missing, there's also an answer as to why your period might be so painful or irregular or god-awful. And you deserve answers and like good health care to support you getting to a better place of balance.
That's so good. Thank you. Yeah, I love that. I have a 17-year-old daughter, and she is seeing a lot of her friends being given birth control for acne. And so she's been asking me a lot of questions about it, like, Mom, is this a good thing or not?
Yeah. Yeah. And the tricky thing about that is like, it's kind of that Band-Aid, again, of like your skin probably will get better on the pill, but then whenever you come off the pill, like those hormonal acne issues are going to come back with a vengeance. So it's tricky. My girls are much younger, 6 and 2, so we haven't had the pleasure of getting into all of that. But I welcome any tips for managing that in the future.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting because you're not only like kind of navigating what's going on with your daughter, but she's also seeing what is happening with her friends. And so it does give the opportunity for a lot of great conversations.
Yeah.
So anyone that wants to stay connected to you, keep learning from you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, so you can follow along at food.freedom.fertility. So I talk more about missing periods, especially missing periods in active women, how to recover and get pregnant. So that's kind of the best place to connect with me, follow along, say hi. That's where I hang out the most.
Awesome. And if somebody wants to work with you?
So we offer a group coaching program. It is more fertility focused, but we also take on some non-fertility clients as well. So we have a 3-month program where we offer kind of a hybrid of one-on-one coaching and group. And we can link the application if somebody's super interested in show notes.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely put all that in the show notes for everybody. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. This was amazing.
Yeah. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for helping women. Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.